The Charge of the Light Brigade, sponsored by Tempernor. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death, rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death, rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew, someone had blundered. There's not to make reply, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. Into the valley of death, rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed out with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there, charging an army, while all the world wondered, plunged in the battery smoke, right into the line they broke. Cossack and Russian reeled from sabre's stroke, shattered and sundered, while they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed out with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of the 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honour the charge they made. Honour the Light Brigade, noble 600. William Rog Carey, Caleb Berry, Ethan Mitchell Moore, and Hughie Ellison Bumble.
Biography of Lord Alfred Tennyson. He was one of the most important poets of the Victorian period. He was a poet laureate, the country's official poet, from 1850 until his death in 1892, making him the longest ever serving laureate. Tennyson's early life. Alfred Tennyson was born in Lincoln in 1809 as the Napoleonic War was raged in Europe. He was the fourth of 12 children. While he came from respectable stock, his father was a clergyman. Tennyson's early home life was unstable. His father suffered from mental illness, and disappointed by his station in life, he took to drink and drugs. Many of Tennyson's siblings had mental breakdowns, and Alfred himself occasionally fell into unexplained trances. His fear, which turned out to be unfounded, was that he had inherited epilepsy from his father. Tennyson's unhappy childhood helped explain the themes of murder, madness, conflict, greed, and loveless marriage that run through his work. Perhaps to escape harsh reality, Alfred started writing poetry from a young age. He published his first poems while still a student at Cambridge. Cambridge. This is where he spent perhaps the happiest years of his life. He was good-looking, clever, funny and popular with a close group of peers. At Cambridge, Alfred met a brilliant scholar, Arthur Henry Hallam. The dark years. The pair were intensely close, and Arthur was engaged to Alfred's sister. But 4 years after the meeting, this warm friendship ended when Arthur suddenly died. Always fragile, Tennyson lamented, "I suffered what seemed to me to shatter all my life, so that I decided to die rather than to live." For anyone who knew Tennyson through the second half of the 1830s and for most of the 1840s, it must have been that he was going off the rails. He moved from about place to place, staying with family and friends, or in cheap London hotels. But despite this erratic, nomadic lifestyle and this heavy drinking and smoking, he was still writing. Recognition. In 1850, Tennyson published in Memorial A.H.H. The poem was dedicated to his late friend, Arthur Hallam. It was a favourite of Queen Victoria, who said the book helped to comfort her after her husband Albert's death. With Victoria's patronage, Tennyson was acclaimed as the greatest poet of his day and was appointed poet laureate, succeeding William Wordsworth. The charge of the Light Brigade was written at the height of his fame in 1854.
Language. Anaphora. The poem also makes use of anaphora. This means the same word is repeated at the beginning of several consecutive lines.
Cannon to the right of them! Cannon to the left of them! Cannon in front of them! Volley and thunder!
Here, the method creates a sense of unrelenting assault. At each line, our eyes meet the word cannon, just as the soldiers meet their flying shells at each turn. Personification. These dangers are presented as being unavoidable and death inevitable with the use of personification. For example, into the jaws of death and into the mouth of hell. Militaristic language. The language of the poem is understandably militaristic. It bristles with guns, soldiers, cannon and sabres. However, the power of the poem comes from the careful use of imagery and sound effects. Biblical language. The strong central image of the Valley of Death refers to a poem in the Bible, Psalm 23, about the Valley of the Shadow of Death. By using this biblical allusion, which had been very familiar to his audience, Tennyson elevates the event to a great importance. Alliteration. Tennyson's use of alliteration creates a visceral effect. For example, stormed at with shot and shell, the use of sibilants reflects the viciousness of the attack. Questions. He also uses a rhetorical question at the beginning of the final stanza. When can their glory fade? After 5 previous stanzas, the answer to this question is clear. Their glory should not fade, because their sacrifices are symbolic of all those who lay down their lives for the country. Action. There's a great deal of action and energy in the poem, but no detail of the blood, guts, terror and screams of the battlefield. This is illustrated in these lines, which offer a glorious rather than graphic description. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there. Adjectives. Tennyson doesn't use overly extravagant adjectives to describe the soldiers. He writes that they rode boldly, and uses the word well twice to describe how they fought, which is a very plain, restrained adjective. Perhaps this is to increase the impact of its highest praise, which he saves for the end of the poem, when he calls them Noble 600.
The poem is very regular in its structure, with several examples of repetition. It is a narrative poem with features of the ballad form. This means that each stanza progresses throughout the story of the attack. There are 6 stanzas, as if each stanza is a memorial stone to 100 of the 600 cavalrymen. In the first 3 stanzas, the Light Brigade is approaching the guns. There is a strong structure in each stanza. For example, the first stanza begins with 3 lines, each with 6 to 7 syllables. Half a league, Godmund, on the Valley of Death. These are followed by a shorter line of 5 syllables, rode the 600. This pattern suggests the strong formation in which the cavalry charge, and its consistency in the first 5 stanzas. The final 2 lines of the first 3 stanzas act as a refrain or a chorus. These lines remind the reader of the danger faced by the 600 as they carry on through the Valley of Death and into the mouth of hell. In stanza 2, the Light Brigade has engaged the enemy, so the longer stanzas describe the struggle. The structure starts to vary from stanza 4. For example, the rhythm is broken by 4 shorter lines. Stanza 5 has only 2 short lines, 42 and 48. The desperate attempt to retreat is expressed in the run of 6 longer lines, 43 to 48. It is also apparent in the use of more negative diction, plunged, reeled, shattered. Stanza 6 has short, sharp conclusions. These are the lines Tennyson wants us to remember the Light Brigade by.
Form. The form could be described as frenzied, sometimes falling into a pattern, only to fall out again. For example, the stanzas range in length from 6 to 12 lines long. Sometimes a rhyming couplet or triplet appears, such as in stanza 4 with the triplet bear, air, and there. However, there is no set pattern to the rhyme lines across the whole of the poem. This irregularity in form reflects the movement of the soldiers during the charge. They are trying to stay in a formation, but constantly being forced apart by the enemy fire. The irregular form could also reflect the fact that those in command did not have control of the situation and therefore blundered by ordering a senseless attack.
The Light Brigade made their fateful charge during the Battle of Balaclava. This was part of the Crimean War, which saw the British and Russian empires on opposing sides. The poem was written in 1854 in order to honour the men who both fought and died during the charge. Light cavalry were typically deployed against retreating infantry or artillery units, or used for skirmish-style attacks, but not frontal engagements. The initial plan for the Light Brigade was sound. However, due to miscommunications, they were directed to the near-suicidal mission described in the poem. The soldiers do not make reply or reason why when they are sent on their doomed mission. Modern-day readers could consider the merits and danger of blind obedience in their lives. Authority figures from employers to politicians encourage people to follow orders, but is it always right to do what you're told without question? Attitudes and ideas. Tennyson's job as a poet laureate was to capture the public mood. The Charge of the Light Brigade is an emotive poem that both praises and laments the action of the battle. During the Crimean War, the idea of a heroic and brave British soldier emerged, whose moral duty was to fight for justice. Previously, military heroes were the gentlemen of the upper class, but the heroes who returned from Crimea were the common, ordinary men who fought for their country. Their actions were recognised for the first time in 1857, when Queen Victoria awarded the Victoria Cross to gallant servicemen regardless of class or rank. Tennyson communicates disgust at the treatment of the men. Someone had blundered in the decision to attack. However, the poem also presents the view that taking orders and serving one's country is honourable. There's not the reason why, there's but to do and die. The final stanza seems to show some delight at what they did. Oh, the wild charge they made. The poem ends with a command to the reader to remember the men and honour the charge they made. It could be argued, therefore, that Tennyson is more concerned with creating national heroes for a nation, rather than mourning the dead or arguing against the war. Honour the charge they made, honour the Light Brigade, Noble 600. What the poem could mean in modern context. Courage is a hard thing to figure. You can have courage based on a dumb idea or mistake, but you're not supposed to question adults, or your coach, or your teacher, because they make the rules. Maybe they know best, but maybe they don't. It all depends on who you are, where you come from. Then at least one of the 600 guys think about giving up and joining the other side. I mean, the value of death, that's a pretty nasty film. That's why courage is tricky. Should you always do what others tell you to do? Sometimes you might not even know what you're doing. I mean, any fool can have courage, but honour, that's the real reason you either do something or you don't. It's who you are, and maybe who you want to be. If you die trying for something important, then you have both honour and courage, and that's pretty good. I think that what the writer is saying is that you should hope for courage and try for honour, and maybe even pray that the people telling you what to do have some too.